first job was at McDonald's. This building was attached to a gas station and located off a busy highway. I was 14, all kinds of bad luck at this age, and started a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. This early, the store was usually empty, so only 3 people, myself included, were in the restaurant. The manager, who was in the back, the cook, who was also in the back, and I, the cashier, who was up front. I was wiping down the counter when a man who looked to be in his mid-30s or early 40s came in. He didn't order anything but went straight to the restrooms, which were in the restaurant area just around the corner from my cash. Many truckers and travelers would come in to simply use the washrooms and leave, so this was not an uncommon occurrence. I didn't think much of it, but after the man was done, he came up to the counter and said, "Excuse me, I was in the bathroom and one of the toilets is overflowing." I immediately came around the corner and let him lead me towards the restroom. Suddenly, I got a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach and stopped dead in my tracks. I became very aware that nobody was in the restaurant area, and the only other 2 people in the store were in the back and would not be able to hear me if I went to the bathroom. The man had the restroom door open and realized I had paused. He nonchalantly said, "Come on in, I'll show you," which came off innocently enough, but it didn't sit well with me. I smiled and said, "Yeah, one moment, I'll get my manager," and I started making my way back to the counter. "It'll only take a minute," he called out. I met my manager in the back and explained to him that a man was complaining about an overflowing toilet. My manager went to check it out, and I followed closely behind. When we turned the corner, the man was gone, and we entered the bathroom. No toilet was overflowing at all. We exchanged a look and never brought it up again. To this day, I feel like some divine intervention gave me the wisdom to know not to follow the man into the bathroom. The whole situation only lasted a few seconds, but it felt like forever. I was young and trusting, and this man could have done who knows what, and I wouldn't have been heard. He could have left, gotten away with whatever it was he planned, and hit the highway. I never did see him again. It was a lovely day. Yesterday, to be exact. My wife turns to me around 6 o'clock and says, "Hey, I'm craving a McFlurry. Can we go to McDonald's?" Now mind you, I'm a bit blazed. Not totally stoned, but enough to be relaxed and still sane of mind. I didn't want to go, but with my wife's puppy eyes, I simply couldn't resist, so off we go. A bit of backstory about my car because it's important. I drive a small green box car with somewhere around 7 to 10 stickers on it. Mostly, they're video game and anime themed, but I have 2 that are vitally important to this story. Mr. and Mrs. and Sorry I Missed Church. I was practicing witchcraft and becoming a lesbian. I'm fairly certain that these 2 stickers are the reason why this happened. We pull into the drive-thru and we order our McFlurries and we wait. By this point, we are still at the speaker and waiting for the cars to move up. In comes the staring lady. She pulls in behind us in her white Nissan Frontier, and I notice her staring at my stickers. I know she is because she leans over her steering wheel to get a better look. I'm very much used to this, and it's kind of the reason I put them there. 9 out of 10 times I get a smile or a laugh, sometimes a few pictures. Whether it's because it's cringy or because they like it, I don't care. I made somebody smile. Anyways, after she stares at my car for a few minutes, I see her back up and start to pull around. But I pay no mind. The line is at a standstill, so I think she got fed up with waiting. It wasn't until my wife said, "Is that lady staring?" that I even noticed what was going on. This lady straight up Luigi'd us. She slowly drove around the cement barrier between the drive-thru and passed through and stared as she drove past. But whatever, crazy lady, right? Well, she parks in one of the spots near the entrance and idles there. My wife goes, "Wouldn't it be funny if she followed us?" I laugh. Of course it would, because she's crazy enough to do that during the day. 15 minutes pass and we paid for our food. Now we're waiting for the ice cream. And the lady is still sitting there. We finally get our ice cream. At this point, she's been idling at that parking spot for nearly 20 minutes. I, trying to reason with the matter, go, well, maybe she ordered her food and forgot, so she just went around and parked. Sure. But wrong again, because as soon as I pull out of the drive-thru, she puts her truck in reverse and starts to follow us. Naturally, I started blurting, "Oh man, dude, you have to be kidding me. No way." As soon as the guy in front of me, waiting for traffic to clear, moved, I floored it right behind him, and she was right on my tail. I'm panicking. Who does this in broad daylight and in front of dozens of people and cameras? So my driving instincts kick in. I've got the love of my life with me and our baby boy, Atlas, our 2-year-old Dutch Shep. No way was I going to let some crazy woman drive us off the road. I do a quick turn onto a side street and she follows suit. I floor it and she floors it. And damn me if a red light doesn't cut us off. Thankfully, another car pulled into the turn lane beside me. I was in the inner turn lane, so we had 2 cars between us. As soon as the light turned green, I floored it again. This time I cut in front of the 2 cars that were in front of her. I quickly turned onto the main road that the other 2 cars had been heading towards. I knew if I just got out of line of sight, I'd be in the clear. Thankfully, I was right, because I turned onto the main road, glanced in the rearview mirror, and noticed that the car behind me was taking a sweet time turning. Perfect. I take another left onto a random side road, then another left and park in someone's driveway. And there we sat for roughly 10 minutes while we tried to not cry as our adrenaline melted away, along with our McFlurries. So to that crazy McDonald's staring lady, please get some help. I worked the overnight shift at a McDonald's for about 8 months. It was located off a main road in a suburban area. There were houses a few blocks away, but nothing else open late except a 24-hour gym down the street. Night shifts were usually calm. Between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., there would be maybe 4 or 5 customers total. I always preferred working in the back where the grills were, but overnight, I was responsible for both the register and the drive-thru. It sometimes felt like I was running the whole place myself. Even though a manager and a cook technically stayed with me, the manager spent most of the night in her office doing paperwork, and the cook often hung out in the freezer room or took really long bathroom breaks. Most nights, it felt like I was alone. The first time I saw this man, it was around 2:30 a.m. He walked in through the front entrance. I remember how cold it was outside, and he wasn't dressed for the weather, just an old gray zip-up jacket and jeans that looked too big for him. He was tall, probably in his mid-40s and thin, with greasy hair that stuck out unevenly. He stood near the door for several seconds, like he was figuring out what to do. Then he walked slowly to the counter. I asked if he wanted to order. No answer. He just stared at me like he wasn't sure he was supposed to say anything. Finally, he shook his head and walked over to a booth in the corner. He just sat there with his hands flat on the table, staring straight ahead. No phone, no food, just sitting. I didn't think anything of it at first. We'd get homeless people sometimes who only want to be inside where it was warm. As long as they didn't bother anyone, we let them stay for a bit. But he didn't leave. An hour passed, and then another. He didn't move at all except to occasionally adjust how he was sitting. Every time I looked at him, he wouldn't blink. He didn't seem tired, hungry, or restless, just alert, watching nothing. Around 4 a.m., the manager came up front because she had to do some drawer checks. He noticed him sitting there and assumed he ordered something earlier. When she asked him if he needed anything, he finally stood up. Then he walked slowly to the exit without saying a single word and disappeared into the dark. She joked that he didn't tip. The second night he returned around the same time. Again, he sat without ordering. He stayed for hours and left right before the morning crew arrived. Then he started coming every night, always at almost exactly 2:30 a.m., always leaving around 5. He never ate, never looked around. He only stared forward with a blank expression, like he was waiting for something. One night, I tried to talk to him. I brought him a cup of water and asked if he needed help with anything. He slowly moved his eyes to me. There was nothing behind them. No reaction, not even confusion. It felt like he looked right through me. Then he shifted his eyes back to the wall again. Something about him made me feel sick to my stomach. It wasn't that he looked dangerous necessarily, it was the opposite. He looked like something was missing inside of him. Around his 6th night in, things escalated. I was in the back stocking cups. The dining room was completely empty. It had been dead silent for 15 minutes. Out of nowhere, I heard the soda fountain start pouring, a steady stream of soda hitting the floor. I walked out and saw the man holding a large cup under the dispenser, but he wasn't touching the lever. His hand was just hovering underneath, but the soda continued flowing like something was pressing the handle down, even though nothing was. He wasn't drinking it. He just let it splash over his fingers and spill onto the floor. Then he walked back to his booth with the cup still overflowing and sat with it leaking all over the table and onto the seat. I told the manager. She asked him politely to leave if he wasn't going to order or clean up his mess. He stood up so suddenly his chair slammed backward. That was the first time I saw emotion on his face. His jaw was clenched tight. His eyes were wider. His breathing was heavy. He stared directly at her and didn't blink once. My manager froze like she didn't know what to do if he attacked. Then, just like before, he turned around and walked out without a word. After that night, she started locking the doors at 2 a.m. and making people use the drive-thru only. But that didn't stop him. A week later, I noticed somebody outside walking the length of the building, back and forth, passing by each window slowly. The lights outside were dim and flickered a lot, so it was mostly shadow. But every few seconds, he'd pass into the light and I'd catch a glimpse of him. He walked alongside the building more than 20 times, never coming inside, just pacing, staring through each window, checking to see if we saw him. The next night, he was back at his booth. I didn't even see him come in. One moment the dining room was empty, and the next he was sitting there in the same seat as he always does. I kept glancing up from the register. Every time I did, he was staring directly at me. His face didn't move, but every time I looked away for even a second, the angle of his head changed like he was tracking my exact movements. I told the cook to stay up front with me for the rest of the night. A customer came in around 3:45 a.m. The man slowly turned and stared at the newcomer the entire time he ordered. The customer kept looking over his shoulder. He could feel something was wrong too. He ate very quickly and left. As soon as he got outside, the stranger stood and followed. I walked to the window to watch. The customer was already in his car reversing out. The man stood directly behind his bumper, forcing him to stop. Then he moved to the driver's side door and pressed his face against the window. The customer sped off immediately, driving over the curb to escape. The man didn't react. He just came back inside and sat down again like it wasn't strange at all. That was the moment I decided I wouldn't let another coworker be left alone with him. 2 nights later, things got even worse. I went to take the trash out to the dumpsters behind the building. It was really quiet back there, and the security light kept buzzing like it was going out. As I dropped a bag inside the dumpster, I noticed a shadow move at the edge of the light. A man stepped into view. He was so close I could see the dirt under his fingernails. He had followed me outside. I backed away slowly, leaving the dumpster lid open. He took a step toward me, then another. His breathing was loud, like he had been running, but his face still had that blank, empty stare. He reached his hand out to me. I rushed back inside and locked the door before he could get close. He stood there staring through the glass window, breathing fog against it. He just stood motionless. Finally, he walked away into the darkness behind the building. The manager called the cops, but they didn't find anything. They said he might be harmless, probably just mentally disturbed and fixated on your building, they said. We installed extra cameras and we started to lock the doors earlier, but somehow he kept getting inside, every single night. 2 weeks later was the last time I saw him. Around 3 a.m., he was in his usual booth. I was trying to ignore him. Suddenly, I heard the sound of heavy dripping. Not soda, something thicker. He was bleeding. A line of blood ran down his arm from under his sleeve and dripped onto the table. He didn't even seem to notice. It soaked into the sea, and he stared at me like always. I called the manager out immediately, and she went to talk to him. But he didn't move. She said that we needed to call an ambulance, but the second she turned her back, he stood and walked straight to the emergency exit without setting off the alarm. We rushed outside, and he was already halfway across the parking lot. Then he disappeared behind the dentist's office. We never saw him again. Unfortunately, the cameras never got a good shot of his face. The police suggested that he was living somewhere nearby. They searched abandoned properties and checked shelters. They didn't find anyone matching his description. Some nights after closing, when I'm heading to my car, I still feel like somebody's watching me from the shadows. I worked that shift only for another month, because I requested days permanently. The seat he always sat in still has a faint dark stain under the cushion. Nobody else notices it, but I do. This encounter happened to me while attending college at Auburn University in Alabama. It was a hectic part of the fall school semester when students are busy preparing for final exams. I was no exception to the rule. One of the nice things about Auburn University, which is not uncommon to many other colleges, is that the library remains open 24 hours a day during final exams. As you can imagine, such an open invitation draws in a large crowd. Students occupy all the available space on several floors with books and ideas. On this particular night, at least one of them was not a student. Let me explain. I arrived at the library early in the afternoon. navigated my way to the third floor and quickly located a desk for intense concentration. Hours passed by as I put my attention on the pages of my organic chemistry textbook. It became dark outside. I was extremely happy with my progress. I celebrated with a sandwich, chips, and a few beers. At just past 11 o'clock, nature called. I entered the bathroom and made my way up to the stall furthest from the entrance. A few minutes passed by and then another person entered. Here's where things turned creepy. We are two, and we're alone. For what seemed like an eternity, I only heard silence. No toilet flushing, no feet shuffling, no hand washing, absolutely nothing. Then he locked the door. At this point, my mind was rushing. Was I about to be robbed? Random act of violence? Is it a joke? I tried to stay calm as he walked over to the stall that I occupied. Eventually, he broke this silence with an offer I will never forget. He offered me a Happy Meal. I kindly but firmly rejected, and thankfully, he exited the bathroom. I quickly finished my business, washed my hands, and noped out of there. The exchange had me absolutely spooked. Study time was over. On my way out of the library, I spotted him. Our eyes locked briefly, and then I turned away. I could feel his stare. All that I remember about him is that he was a middle-aged man wearing makeup and a McDonald's uniform. I haven't eaten there since. After reading these comments, first, contrary to popular belief, I did not have a close encounter with Ronald McDonald. Although, now that I go back and read the story, it does appear this way. This happened when I was in middle school living in Utah, in a small town where nothing really like this ever happens. My friend Tyler and I would walk home together most days. The route took us straight past the McDonald's, which was the main hangout spot for kids after school. We usually stopped there to get fries or soda before the walk home. One week, that routine changed because of this older man we kept seeing around. The first time we noticed him, he was sitting outside on one of the concrete benches. It looked like he didn't belong there. Most people sitting outside were parents watching their kids or teenagers hanging out. But this man looked much older and rougher. His clothes were dirty and his face looked worn and pale. He just stared at us while we walked by. We joked about it at first and went inside, but when we came back out, he wasn't there anymore. We didn't think much of it. The next day, he was there again. Same bench, same stare. He followed us with his eyes as we walked by. We tried to ignore him though. Halfway down the sidewalk, I got this feeling that somebody was behind us. I didn't want to turn around, but curiosity eventually made me. The man was now walking in our direction. Slowly, but definitely following our same path. We sped up. After a couple of blocks, I checked again. He was still coming, but staying far enough back that maybe we could pretend it was just coincidence. After that day, we agreed to avoid McDonald's for a bit, but it was practically part of the walk home. It felt really weird to change our entire routine because of one creepy guy. A few days later, we walked past again. The man wasn't outside this time, so we thought maybe he wasn't around. So we went inside for a quick snack. We ate fast because something felt off. When we were done, we got up to leave, and there he was. He was standing near the back of the dining room, facing us. It was like he had been waiting. We hurried out of there without looking at him. When we got outside, I looked behind through the glass windows. The man was now right up against the inside of the window, staring at us through it. There was something so unsettling about how deliberate everything he did felt. Nobody else seemed to notice him there. We rushed home and talked about how strange he was, but we weren't scared enough yet to tell anyone. We thought he was just a creepy guy who liked bothering kids. The following week, he wasn't there at all. For days, we actually almost forgot about him. Then one afternoon, we were walking home and noticed him again. This time he was standing behind the McDonald's dumpsters when we passed. He didn't sit or lurk near where others would see him. His body was just barely visible from the alleyway. We tried to walk faster without making it obvious. When we got to the corner of the street, I looked back to check if he was still there, and he wasn't. But then we heard footsteps speed up behind us. When we turned, he was already much closer than before. He wasn't pretending to be subtle anymore. He was gaining distance on us, and there wasn't anyone else around that part of the neighborhood. We started walking as fast as we could without running. Eventually, we got close to my house, and the man stopped at the end of the street. His head tilted like he was memorizing the place. He ran inside as soon as we reached my door. That night I kept thinking about that moment. How he slowed down when he saw where we lived. Like he was trying to remember. The next day, my mom drove us home. We didn't see him anywhere. We tried to act normal. Then the weekend came. I was home alone because my parents were out running errands and Tyler was with his family. I was watching YouTube in the living room when there was a loud knock at our front door. I checked the people, but nobody was there. A minute later, another knock, this time from the side of the house, then the back door. It was like whoever it was wanted me to move around the house trying to find them. I didn't go near the windows. The knock stopped after a couple of minutes, but the fear stayed. I called my parents and they came home early. The next school day, we walked into McDonald's to see if we'd spot him again. The employees were talking about something when we entered. They seemed genuinely stressed, not gossiping. We overheard them mention a man hiding in the restroom and how he scared customers. One of them pointed toward a police officer outside talking to a manager. We didn't stay, we went straight home. 2 days later, I looked out my bedroom window late at night. Street lights in our area don't reach far. I saw movement near the edge of the sidewalk by our house. Somebody was standing still near the corner. They were facing the house. I stood there frozen in fear, hoping it was just my eyes adjusting. I kept watching until the person slowly stepped back and disappeared behind some parked cars. I couldn't sleep at all that night. My parents called the police again and reported everything we could. They said they would drive by more often and keep an eye out. For the next month, nothing happened. The man didn't show up again. We didn't see him, near school or McDonald's or anywhere. Eventually, life kind of went back to normal. But that summer, my dad mentioned casually that our McDonald's had added new security cameras because somebody kept trespassing late at night. Nobody could identify who it was because they stayed out of clear view. We moved to another town before the next school year. I didn't walk home from school anymore. I didn't go to McDonald's much either. Sometimes I wonder if the man really followed us all those times or if it was just coincidence. But whenever I think back to him staring through the glass or standing still at the end of my street or knocking on the walls of my home, I don't feel like it was a coincidence. The house that I currently live in has an attic, and I have lived in this house for the past 8 years, since I was 13 years old. One night during a bad winter where it was constantly raining and had strong winds, I heard boxes being moved in the attic. I freaked out and lay awake the whole night, listening to these weird sounds coming from the attic. In the morning, I confronted my parents, asking if it was them. They both denied it and have no reason to go up there. They only go in around Christmas time because that's where we store the tree. Christmas decorations and stuff we don't use but don't want to throw away. I told them I heard noises and they both brushed me off and claimed I was just hearing things. The next night I heard the sounds again, and the next night and the night after. For the whole week I told my friends at school and they said somebody must be in my attic. I told them that it was impossible. The only way in my attic is by grabbing the ladder from the shed in the garden, coming into the house and next to the laundry, which is next to my room. There's a hole, like a proper hole. Sorry, I don't know how to describe it, with a panel covering it, and that's how you get in the attic. After that week, when the weather cleared up and I didn't hear any more noises coming from the attic, I simply forgot about it until I forgot my key one day. I called my dad, who was at work, and asked him if there was a spare key hidden somewhere I could use to get in. He told me there was a way of getting into the attic via the roof. He told me about a large panel on the roof that could be removed and you could get into the attic. It is also quite easy to get on the roof, and my younger brother has done it many times with ease, to rescue our cat or balls that ended up there. My blood went cold. Somebody could have gotten to the attic. Someone could have been in our attic for a week, and then a dark thought crossed my mind. What if he was still there? I noped out hard and walked around the neighborhood for 3 hours instead while waiting for my dad to come home. When he did, I told him again about that week I heard noises in the attic and how we could have gotten in. But again, he brushed me off. The next few years were filled with the occasional horror moment. I have 2 glass doors in my room that face the backyard, and we have lights on motion sensors in the garden. One night while I was sleeping, my dog was asleep next to me and my back to the glass doors. My room was suddenly flooded with light. Someone or something was in the garden. I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just a stray cat, I thought. Then is when my dog started growling. He is a very sweet dog and timid. Our kitten bullies, and I froze. I had never heard him growl before, and that's when I heard a tapping on the glass door. I wanted to cry. I was terrified that if whoever was tapping on the glass wanted in, the glass wasn't going to stop him. Tapping continued for a few more minutes. I lay still, pretending to be asleep. Then I heard the doorknob being tested, and then my dog started barking, really deep and menacing like. Whoever was there fled. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, scared that he was going to come back. In the morning, my dad yelled at me due to the dog barking waking him up. I cried and told him about what happened. Once again, he brushed me off. Another time, when we changed the locks because my brother had lost his wallet with his keys in it, and their address was in his wallet, it later was found in our mom's house. My dad gave me my new key for the front door, put it on my bed, and went shopping with my dad and brother. When I came back, it was gone. I searched everywhere. It never turned up. I ended up taking the spare key my dad had hidden in the garden and pretending it was my main. He would later put another key in the garden, which was hidden under my dog's bed. This is important for later. Other things have happened, but I think I have given enough backstory. This was about 2 months ago. My dad travels for work sometimes. When he does, my brother says he and our mom look after the house and the animals. My dad had been gone for about 5 days when this happened. I had left the main computer on, and it was just on my Google homepage. I went to bed and woke up 2 hours later. My stomach was killing me. I rushed to the bathroom and threw up. I had made it a bit of a mess, so I went to the kitchen. I have an open plan kitchen, so it also has a dining room and a small living room in this big room. The main computer is also in this room. To grab a mop and bucket. That's when I saw the computer screen on. Not dark like when you don't touch your computer for a while and the screen goes black. Curious, I went over to look at it and saw it was on YouTube, on a random music search page, with the music typed into the search bar. I was freaked out, like, what the heck? I clicked back and it went on a few different music things before going on a website of a university my brother was considering going to, and I had taken him to the open day only a few weeks ago. Then I clicked back again, and it went on my email. I leave it logged in, and then it went to my university homepage. I was beyond freaked out. All I could think was somebody was in my house, and they had used my computer and gone searching for all this stuff. But why? I quickly grabbed a knife and headed to the main living room, which is next to the front door. Called my best friend, who lived a 30-minute drive away, and she told me she was coming to pick me up. I searched the living room while on the phone with her, and I told her if I screamed to call the police. After making sure the living room was safe, I paced, waiting for her. My cats were freaked out and were hiding, something they never do. When she arrived, we searched my house. I violently kicked doors open and yelled that if somebody was in the house, I would stab them. There was no one inside the house. I was still freaked out, and my best friend told me I was spending the night with her at her house. I felt bad leaving my animals, but I couldn't bring them due to her having dogs that didn't like cats and could be aggressive with my dog at times. As we were leaving, a thought hit me. What if the person was in the attic? My best friend told me no way we were searching the attic and grabbed me. I didn't call the police, and my dad arrived home the next day. I told him what had happened last night, and he had laughed at me and once again brushed me off. I do believe there is, or at least was, someone living in my attic. I'm very scared to be left home alone overnight, and I'll update if anything else happens, and I do plan on moving out next year. This happened around 2018. For context, a buddy of mine, we'll call him KG, used to be our group's ladies' man, and it wasn't uncommon for him to want to go meet up with somebody during the night. This night in particular was no different. Some girl had messaged him on a dating app inviting him to come hang out. He said he was with a friend, but we'd be free in a few hours. He said no problem, just bring him with you. We can all smoke and just hang out. I was fine with it, and she gave KG the address. The place was an apartment about an hour away. We got in the truck and headed over. The drive was about 30 minutes down the highway, followed by 45 minutes of nothing but gravel roads and fields. I distinctly remembered we joked about how it felt like we were in an alternate dimension. Zero light, no houses, and don't remember seeing a speed limit or a stop sign for most of the drive. Once we arrived, it was extremely ominous. A single yellow light hung over a single apartment building that probably only had about 3 units. The place looked old and borderline abandoned. The girl, who I'll call M, was standing out there waiting for us. I couldn't make out any features, as all I saw from the car was a silhouette. We got out, and she let us inside. KG seemed uncomfortable when he saw her, but was playing it off. I noticed she was considerably older than us, and was not the type KG would normally go for. To be entirely honest, She looked cracked out. Her face was covered in the marks you see when stimulant users pick their faces. Regardless, we got in her apartment and shit was off immediately. The place was bare. A single couch lined with plastic and a TV sat in the living room. And the kitchen cabinets were all empty, and many were just open. For some reason, I also remember Bob's Burgers playing at a crazy loud volume on the TV. She had a couple of blunts already rolled up, and I got to breaking down our share to roll. She offered us to drink some wine and said it was all that she had. She poured 3 glasses, and I knocked back about half of it before almost gagging at a chemical taste. I didn't say anything. I don't really like wine as is, and only accepted it because I was thirsty, and she said her tap water wasn't safe to drink. I figured it was just really cheap and didn't want to be rude. KG drank his, and we got to smoking and talking. Once she got to go to the bathroom, KG whispered to me that he got catfished and showed me the profile with obviously different girls' photos. I asked if we should go, and he said she was probably just insecure, and that he still wants to hang out and see where things go. She got back and insisted on another blunt. Specifically the one she rolled. We kept talking, and I noticed she seemed to be getting antsy and shorter in her responses. She kept being very flirtatious with the both of us as well, saying we'd be a lot more comfy if we went in her room. I also noticed I was beginning to feel strange. Not the fun strangeness of THC, but the ominous feeling that I was losing control of my muscles and having a hard time thinking or talking. KG was basically melted in the couch, but still carrying on talking to her. I looked in my glass and noticed powdery gunk collecting at the top. I felt sick and stumbled to the bathroom. The bathroom was disgusting. I sat down on the side of the tub and tried to figure out what the heck was happening. I was convinced we'd been drugged, but kept telling myself I was just greening out and being paranoid, despite that not being normal for me. I eventually lost track of time and place in there, but luckily I was smart enough to lock the door. At some point, I walked out to see the living room empty and heard groaning in the other room. I knocked on the door and got no answer. I blacked out on the couch again and only came to after hearing shuffling and seeing KG bust out of the room half naked and M following him. I stood up and she looked stone-faced. KG didn't say anything and stumbled fast out the door. I didn't need to be convinced and followed quickly. The entire walk back to the car, she followed us, not running or yelling, just walking with us, seemingly waiting for us to fall. Somehow in his drugged up state, KG got the car going and we peeled off. I don't remember much after that, but we both woke up the next afternoon parked at a church in the middle of nowhere. Both of us had pounding headaches, and KG said after I went in the bathroom, she pulled him up and helped him into the bedroom, whispering how we were hers forever and that we never had to worry about anything ever again. He knew this was bad, but in his haze, he couldn't stand or yell for me. We drove him home silently. I didn't see KG for a while after that, and when I did, we never spoke of it again. Moral of the story? Just because you aren't alone doesn't mean you're safe. Just because you're a man doesn't mean you're safe. If you feel something is off, don't wait to get out of there. And please, don't drink anything you didn't see poured. Sorry if this story is a bit of a downer or if it's inappropriate, but this memory has never left my mind. It was awful and terrifying, but also surreal and almost feels like a dream. KG said that luckily I knocked at the perfect time, and she didn't get what she wanted out of him, and the knock brought him back to momentary awareness. Things could have been a lot worse, but I will never forget what happened in the apartment in the fields. This story happened when I was a junior in high school. I, female, was a friendly and curious person. 1 month into the fall semester, we got a new transfer student. He looked nervous. Seated behind me was Joe. I, of course, introduced myself to him, trying to ease the tension. I showed him what we have learned so far. I helped him look over his class schedule. We had 2 classes and lunch period together. Naturally, we got to know each other and became friends. He's a quiet kid, but talked a lot around me. I assumed he was just comfortable with me. I made it clear that we're just friends, and he agreed. Then we started hanging out with my friends. Now, fast forward to spring break, I told Joe I'm going out of town with my family. He seemed disappointed that we can't spend the break together, but he was understanding. I ran into Joe in a restaurant. I didn't tell him where I was going, so I thought, wow, what a coincidence. He said he was visiting a family in this same town. Now, in senior year, Joe and I hung out at least once a week, then turned into 2, then into 3. I noticed we were spending too much time together, and I wanted to make time for my other friends too. That's when things started to change. I ran into Joe, or should I say I saw him in the corner of my eye when I spent time with someone else or by myself. He became very obsessive and clingy. The first 2 to 3 times, I didn't think much of it. It all became clear when I questioned him, and he accidentally said he followed me because he wants to make sure I'm safe. I felt betrayed and creeped out. He apologized and asked for forgiveness, and I told him I didn't want to be friends anymore. He got really mad and left. He didn't come to school for the next 3 days. My friends told me he harassed them for snitching on him. He came back to school and we pretended that we didn't know each other. On my walk home, I hear Joe calling my name in a low and unfamiliar tone, but he is nowhere to be seen. I didn't know why, but my gut told me to run as fast as I could. I kept running until I got home. I made sure every door and window was locked. I'm convinced I was being paranoid at this point. Then my phone screen lights up. Joe repeatedly called me. Then I hear Joe calling my name again. He's in front of my house now, banging on the door. I called my dad and told him what happened. I pleaded with Joe to stop banging on the door. Everything went completely silent after 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity. The last word I heard from him: "You will always be my best friend." This issue was brought up to the school and Joe never showed up again. Now it's been 4 years. Just a few days ago, I got friend requests on 2 of my social media. It was Joe. I blocked him and changed all my social media names to something else. I don't live in the same town now, nor in the same country. I'm now on the other side of the world, but I can't help feel like a scared 18-year-old me again. I'm not the friendly person I once was. I've become very cautious around other people. Ever since I was 14 years old, I've been scared of lightning. It all started when I was out on a soccer field during a thunderstorm and lightning struck the fence, just over 100 feet away from me. The sound was absolutely deafening, and I can still remember the awful sensation of the sound vibrating through my whole body. But this wouldn't be my only incident involving a lightning strike that I came close to. The next time, it wouldn't only scare me, it would also be my salvation. When I turned 20, I moved out from my parents, who live in the capital of my country, to a small community in the south, and I have no intention of moving back. Sure, a girl that grew up in the city is used to having the endless variation of restaurants, bars, and stores that never close, and a city that never sleeps. But I like it here. Despite the low population of the community and something of a sleepy town stamp on it, it is charming with its colorful wooden houses, the seaside campus, and the smell of butter from the old butter factory as an eternal reminder of where you are. I can practically go out whenever I want, wherever I want, and meet a total of 10 people. The neighborhood cats, and if I'm lucky, a cute but lost hedgehog. There is one more reason why I appreciate living in a small town. It is how incredibly safe I feel here. In the city, you can barely be outside alone as a woman after 10 p.m. without feeling such discomfort that you feel compelled to check behind you once or twice every minute. All such discomfort, however, doesn't only happen after said time or during the darkest hours of the day. It can happen at any time, but that is something you learn, something I had to learn. I was 17 and it was the summer holidays. I was spending most of it at my then boyfriend's house, and he lived with his family about 20 minutes outside of the city. I lived with my parents at the time in the city center, just along the green subway line, so if I wanted to get back home, I had to take the commuter train to the central station, walk across it, switch to the green subway line, and ride a few minutes on there to get to my station. I was then on one of my rebellious periods and had bleached my hair a month before. I loved it at first, but after a while my roots started to show and I realized my mistake. My angel of a mother had been tired of my fuss over it and booked me at a hairdresser so that I could go back to my natural deep brown hair color. The day for my appointment at the hairdresser came, and I was, as usual, at my boyfriend's, but I needed something from my parents' apartment first, so I put on my headphones and jumped on the commuter train. I switched as usual to the green line and sat near one of the doors that I knew would line up perfectly to where I would get off. I like to crowd watch when I travel. Not to stare people out or anything like that, but just to look at people and think about where they are going, what they do for work, or maybe make up a story about them. It's kind of a game I often find myself playing on the subway or a commuter train. I played the game that day. I looked around at people, and when there was one station left until my stop, my eyes stuck to a man who was sitting a few feet in front of me. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-30s. His hair was dark and scruffy, and he was wearing dark clothes and big boots. He sat with his elbows leaning against his knees, crouching slightly down towards the subway floor. Today, I don't remember what my analysis or fictional story of him was, but I know I saw him. The woman in the speaker shouted out my destination, and I stood up and went to the doors and stepped off. When I got out of the doors of the station, I saw that it had started to rain, so I pulled my big hood over the headphones and started to quickly walk up to the apartment, which was only a few hundred feet from the station. The apartment is an old building with a large wooden door facing the street. The door has a glass pane that runs along the entire door, and when you enter, the staircase is entirely in marble with an old wooden elevator with an iron lattice door that you have to close manually. When I got to the door, I put in the entry code and pushed up the door. When the door was swung aside, something was reflected in the glass. I turned around and saw the man from the subway standing behind me. At first, I was a little shocked that he was so close to me, but I assumed he was one of my neighbors or a neighbor's friend. I also assumed that he stood so close to me because it rained and he didn't want to get wet, so I said hello and pressed up the door an extra time with my hip while I took off my headphones. He did not answer. I went to the lift and pressed the button, but I heard that I didn't start, so I assumed that the neighbors had opened the lattice door to park the elevator at their floor while they locked their door. I turned around and saw the man standing behind me, shaking. It was not a typical type of shaking that's common if you have a fever or a cold, but more like a spastic twitching. He stood there jerking, with his head and his back as curved as he had on the subway. But this time his eyes were not on the floor, they were on me. He opened his mouth to talk, but only incoherent sounds came out, while the shaking and jerking became more frantic. "What's your name?" he said at last. I remember my parents' words of wisdom to never tell your name to a stranger, especially one whom you feel threatened by. I wanted to tell him to go, but I felt like I was frozen and provoking him might make the situation worse. I replied with a false name. He then asked, "Do you live here?" I lied and answered that I don't, that I'm just here to see a friend. I remember thinking I was smart. Now he didn't know my name or where I lived, I thought. But it was now that he started moving closer to me. I started backing up. He must have seen the fear in my eyes, but he continued, scuffing towards me. I heard the elevator engine start ticking and that it was on its way down. He told me he has been following me on the train, that he saw me there and that he just had to follow me. It was now that he lifted his head from his previous position, showing how tall he really was, and the shaking stopped. He spoke again. "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he said. If I thought I was frozen before, that was an understatement. I was now pressed against the elevator door, and he was so close that I could feel his scent. Some may think that these words still have to be somewhat flattering, but the way he said it sounded like a death sentence, like something bad for me. It was about when I heard the elevator stop on the first floor and somebody walked down the stairs to the courtyard door. That door is located on a small platform between the ground floor and the first floor stairs. You also know how you can recognize and distinguish your parents' steps from others? I did this with these steps that came down the stairs, and I heard they were my father's. I quickly thought that I would scream for him, but then I realized that the man would know that I first lied and that he might get angry and do something to my old father. That was when my father opened the door to the courtyard and the lightning struck the yard. The sound waves of the cracking lightning pressed themselves through the open door and made the whole marble stairwell scream. I screamed. The man screamed. I went to my usual position regarding thunder and lightning, the fetal position on the floor. He, on the other hand, jumped backwards and started running out while I shouted that we'll be seeing each other again soon. I barely realized what had happened. I went crying up in the elevator and into the apartment where I told everything to my mom and dad when he came up from the courtyard. We reported the incident to the police and I went and dyed my hair, which made me feel a little safer as my appearance changed quite drastically. I was still a little scared after the incident, but also confused. I just kept thinking about what he was saying when he ran out. We will be seeing each other again soon. I knew at least that I absolutely did not want to see him again. However, I didn't get what I wanted. About a month passed and I had practically forgotten about the situation. I was on my way to the central station to meet up with my boyfriend who was on the commuter train on his way to me. I stood and waited for him in the hallway between the commuter trains and the subway. In that particular hallway, a lot of people are walking, either to the trains or from the trains. Very few people are standing still in it. As I said, I stood there, looking down the hallway from time to time, trying to see if my boyfriend had come yet. When I saw somebody else standing still, there was someone standing on the other side of the crowd, and although everyone else goes in different directions and creates a kind of blurred effect on him, I see who it is. I freeze just like before. He stares at me, not like our first meeting, but as if he is trying to make up his mind if I am who he thinks I am, behind the dark hair. Then my boyfriend comes from the crowd and hugs me, and I had to look away from the man a few seconds to hug him back. I leaned my head against his shoulder and looked over it to see if the man was still there, but he was gone. I haven't seen him since. Has he seen me though? This is a story that's really been bothering me lately for absolutely no reason whatsoever. A few months back, I just had this dream that brought back this memory I tried to suppress growing up, but as of recently, it's been weighing on my mind. Growing up in 2005 on the edge of the suburbs, there was a large grove of trees and hills by some railroad tracks that led to a big forest about half a mile from my house. When I was 9 years old, I and my neighborhood friends would ride our bikes to the railroad tracks and walk to the forest to go explore the random pieces of furniture and junk in this peculiar forest. We'd play card games, do homework, and hang with friends out there for about an hour or two, but never sat out there too long. There were small abandoned houses here and there in this forest that we stayed away from, as one neighborhood friend, Michael, told me there was a homeless man who lived in one of them, and if you saw him, to run. So right off the bat, after hearing this, going near this house in the woods was as scary as could be. One chilly November afternoon after school, I came home and dropped off my backpack at my house and immediately went to the woods. My bike was broken, so I walked. Michael had told me at school that day to meet him in this open area of the forest to play Pokemon with him. This was something we'd do frequently growing up, just to pass the time until our parents got home at 4 p.m., so it was nothing unusual. As I crossed the railroad tracks into the forest, I instantly felt a weird sensation, that feeling you feel when somebody is watching you. I looked all around and couldn't see anybody, so I thought I was just getting spooked. As the rather overcast day was very eerie anyway. Tracking through the autumn leaves scattered across this large wooded area, I came upon the big open area where I was supposed to meet Michael. Near the area where we normally met was his notebook, open. On the page was written, "Hey, I had to go back home and grab some batteries for my Game Boy. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon. Michael." I waited. Being alone, especially feeling like somebody was watching me, made this particular moment very uncomfortable. However, I convinced myself I was just being a wuss and decided to wait for him. I sat down and began playing my Game Boy. But it wasn't too long until that sensation of being watched grew into utter paranoia. I kept frantically looking up from my Game Boy and checking my watch to see how long I'd been waiting. I'd been sitting there for 30 minutes. It was beginning to get dark. Then I heard some leaves crunch. I looked in the direction of the sound and briefly saw a dark hooded figure peeking from behind a few trees and hiding back behind them. My skin crawled and I immediately jumped up from where I was sitting and froze in my tracks, staring. I screamed, "Hello?" to see if anybody was there. I was quickly reminded I wasn't alone when I saw this tall, dirty-looking hooded man peek back around from the trees. He called back, "Hey, buddy." I picked up Michael's notebook and ran for my life. I ran so fast I barely had time to look behind me. However, I heard leaves crunching not too far behind me. It was the man running after me. He was screaming for me to come back and, "I just want to talk to you. I'm sorry." I began crying as I was running, thinking this was exactly how those missing kids disappear. I ran and ran and ran until I literally tripped over the railroad tracks and cut up my knees. Michael was just getting to the railroad tracks. He saw me, dirty and bloody and crying hysterically, and I screamed at him to run. Without a question, we ran all the way home. The hooded man was nowhere to be seen once we left the railroad tracks. I last saw him standing in the woods, defeated that he couldn't catch me or something. I don't know. I told Michael everything and we never went back to those woods ever again. Years later, in 2016, they bulldozed the woods and built a neighborhood there. We later found out from fellow neighborhood friends who were in the area that the same thing happened to them growing up. To this day, this is probably one of my scariest stories growing up.